a recap for the new people, if you or your friends or whoever join the SONiC-dash Google groups or the test work group, if your name is in these groups, the meeting minutes will be sent, and hopefully you're receiving them and they're not going to your junk or your spam folder. So, and then I also have other people CC'd here. So if you're interested in receiving notes, just let me know. I can show you how to get those. So last time we skipped for OCP, and we wanted to slot some time for follow-up Q&A regarding the SAI Challenger framework, and if there were other agenda items as well. So this is what we had as we were going out of the last week and into OCP week. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera. And is this something we wanted to do, Chris and Anton, a Q&A for the SAI Challenger framework?
Yeah, thanks, Christina. We wanted to kind of finish up. We didn't quite get all our slides done. We ran out of time, so we'd like to wrap that up and then have some, open Q&A follow-up. We did actually co-present at OCP. Keysight and Peel Vision did a presentation on this platform, some of the recent enhancements. And just to remind people, these enhancements apply across any SAI application. It can be SAI, SONiC, it can be Dash, anything with SAI, even non-SONiC applications. There are some out there. So we actually met with various suppliers and manufacturers at the show, and they expressed quite a bit of interest. So we think the story is resonating, and that ties into the Dash project. And we want to continue this presentation and complete the story. And we're also working on test cases, meanwhile, to flesh this out and show some really good use cases. So Anton, would you like to do the, are you set up to do the SAI ReDis part of the demo, or do you want to just move on to the next slides?
Okay, so actually I wanted to show just maybe 2 slides from the very beginning to remind people what we were talking about, and then we'll continue from the actually ReDis part and some background why we selected that solution. Okay, so I will share the screen right now. 1 second. Okay, so do you see the screen? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that was actually the main slide from our previous presentation, because our goal was to show that we have a single test config in Dash style, and it's used for both device configuration and traffic configuration. So this is kind of a single source of truth which can be used for scaling test cases when we scale both actually the configuration of the device, and then to create appropriate traffic to verify that scaled configuration. Because like when we have thousands of entries, it's much more like convenient to just have some format to identify that we want to increment this or that instead of like copy pasting maybe like a long configuration. So and here you already know that SAI Gen is something that Keysight and Mirfi from Keysight presented. So this is a generator for scale configuration. We reuse it here. It's already in the Dash, and we used it to generate SAI commands. We created like let's say unified SAI SAI format, but it's just a dictionary. I will show it later. And also that configuration we use for traffic profile. SAI Challenger is used here as an abstraction to communicate to Snappy, to the Ixia, or it's possible to have communication with PTF as well. So that's possible, just not for the scale testing, because we are expecting here line rate, and like PTF is not suitable for that. But for simple test cases, it's you can still use it. It's fully compatible, and you can write in this case. That actually was a part of our first demo. And next is that as a client we can use Thrift, or connect and libsci testing, or connect to the ReDis for SyncD testing. Okay, so that was a setup. Then just maybe one slide to show that our unified format for sites. So that's pretty like well-known headers. Like not we haven't actually invented anything here. Just a standard style as we used to see. And yeah, so that's going to the demo. So I finished up when I launched test case on that setup, because like I used the test config and I used the Thrift driver to connect to the SAI Thrift server and configure BMB2 model. So that was the like where we end up. And then we actually mentioned that the same way of configuration could be used for multiple ways. So right now we used ReDis, but like it's not limited to Redis only. So we can there is possibility to add any kind of driver to configure your device under test in SAI way, let's say, based on your need, based on your development stage. Like Redis is just here, so we can use SAI VS to demonstrate it. So that's pretty like simple way to demonstrate some additional possibilities. But the main idea is that still we're using the same container, same framework for different purposes. And I added one slide actually. So the magic behind like that's shift between different types of the client, different DT APIs. So I want like to say that we actually do not copy and reinventing a wheel. So we are just doing abstraction on top of existing clients that allows us to use same test case. So that's what is the most important part. So it's the same test case, same test scenario that can be launched against multiple different environments. It doesn't matter whether you have different type of traffic generator or different type of DUT APIs. So like we targeted right now Thrift. We have an option to run on the Redis, and maybe in future, like we expect to try it on the GNMI as well, or like any vendor can try its own proprietary format for testing it. But the idea is that they will have access to a single test scenario that is not that doesn't require any modification. And yeah, so like basically SAI Challenger has inside the abstraction that convert SAI calls directly to the Thrift. So we using actually Thrift. Thrift is a part of the framework, so that's Thrift PTF is all is here still, and we are just getting from the SAI adapter appropriate function based on the call. We like do not have any hard-coded or functions that need to be modified if you regenerate SAI Thrift. So you're ready to run it on your Thrift server on your environment with your target. So we just like taking SAI attribute, SAI object, and underscore something, and passing it to the Thrift driver directly. And pretty the same happens actually like in the Redis. So we are just doing push publish to the Redis database.
So I have a question on this Redis one. So sorry, I mean I think the you know in this case, right? So in this particular case, I think we're talking about the SAI this dash SAI object, right? So you know in the Thrift part, you know I think the Intel work they can actually generate. You know, based on the new APIs generated all the SAI servers, you know, SAI server code to have that, you know, Dash API to be Swiftized. But how do you get the SyncD to support those new SAI APIs. New Dash SAI APIs.
So for Dash, we do not have yet SyncD. I was for the demo. I was going to run it on the SAI VS just to show the possibility to switch between different APIs. But like
even for SAI VS, right? So as my understanding, I mean, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. So even for the virtual SAI that come with the SyncD, it doesn't support those new Dash APIs, right? So I mean, how would that?
Can I try to let me try to answer that? And there's kind of two parts to the answer. One is the first part I want to preface is what Anton was showing was there's no actual manual code. It's all string manipulation. By the same way that we take SAI header files and the SAI thrift code generator generates APIs all algorithmically based on strings. It's just string concatenation and formation to create the APIs. The SAI Challenger is doing kind of the same thing. It's deriving the attribute, or I should say, the function call from the object and attribute name. So that's one part. There's no manual coding. It's all just the same string manipulation. And as far as CRUD operations in SAI ReDis, it's the same thing. Key value pairs are formed out of strings without having to know a priori the APIs or the objects. It's all just automatic. So that's one thing I wanted to emphasize. There's no manual coding here. It's just a recipe to manipulate strings. The other part is we can't test the SAI ReDis interface for Dash until implementers create SyncD for their implementation. There's no one creating a model for the community. So Anton can demonstrate that the Redis connection is working, and he'll show you that. But until there's a SyncD to test it against, we can't actually make use of this. When the vendors have that, we think this is going to be an invaluable tool to start debugging their SyncD and their Redis connections, etc., without all of SONiC confusing the debugging part. So would you say, Anton, that's fairly accurate what I just said?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, I certainly get that part, but I'm pointing out, right? So in terms of this automatic generation code, right? So my understanding, this code is on the client side, right? So the SAI Challenger X client or the CRUD is also it's all on the client side, right? So
yes,
but on the server side, right? So the Intel developed the Swift framework, they can already generate the server code. But I'm saying that there's no SyncD code, to even translate those. It's not about the vendor, right? So vendor is supporting the site, but the SyncD is maintained by the community. For the SyncD, there's no code that takes those new SAI attribute and
but there will be, right? There will be. Someone will have to write that code for Dash to even work, right? So what we have is a test framework ready to test that when the implementations are ready. Our mission isn't to implement SyncD, is to test it and to test, SAI on up. So we're ready for that. And as soon as someone has an implementation of SyncD for Dash, we have a framework ready to test it. That's really the message we're trying to send.
Yeah, but at least I think on the ReDis side, at least I think we need to see some kind of POC here, right? So because
Anton, you want to show your demo? Anton, do you want to show your demo POC?
Yeah.
Here we go. Thank you for lining that up, Gohan. We're ready.
Yeah, okay, so like here's the setup. So what I'm going to say, show, I will use same Docker container. I will use still XCSC with all engines, and I will replace Swift server BMV2 with Redis, with actually SAI VS. Okay, so I have 3 windows that I used to have for the demo with BMV2, but right now I will cut it a little bit. Okay, make so I will connect to the inside of the container, and actually by default I'm in the Dash test cases in the VNet test scenario that I showed last time. And right now I will switch on one of the panes to SAIVS. Second time. Okay, so that's for. Okay, let's see. So I have SAI channel, the server SAIVS actually container I have running it here, and I have our Dash SAI Challenger client running. Okay, so that's and plus 3 containers for the XCSC. So that's good. Next, I'm creating actually links between between SAIVS and our container here. Okay, so that's okay because 3 links are already 3 interfaces already created by the XAC, but so that's if I will be running like native SAI Challenger, there won't be any warnings at all. Okay, so I'm ready. Oh, first of all, before running any test case, I will just want to enter the server container and show that some commands actually are sent in there. There is no. Okay, we'll use TCP dump on the ReDis port to see that something's going on here. Okay, let's test cases. Okay, yeah, and I will run so that test actually. Oh, sorry, I didn't change the folder to the test. Okay, so that was a folder with Dash test cases, and here test cases for SAIVS. So that's a little bit different one. So like I want to remind that the idea is that to run exactly the same test, but while we do not have SyncD for the Dash, I have to use SAIVS. Okay, so and here I see that some calls go to the. Okay. Okay, so sorry, so that I need to I need to check with happens, but like the idea is that I got actually calls to the ReDis through the same environment, and I wanted to say to show one thing more. I will try run demo once again, but I wanted to just remind since that we had. To change from the ReDis to Thrift and back, I need to change only one part in the configuration. I am just changing the client type. So that's I have Redis, I have IP where connect to, I have port where connect to, and actually connection happens. So I sent some comments, but I maybe I will try another test case to check maybe something didn't come up well. Oh, okay. So it's okay. It's good. So I will maybe so it happens for me that same test was running so the second time. Okay, so maybe so. Oh yeah. So maybe SAIVS was not finished setup. Okay, so it's running and connecting through the Redis, but yeah. So the idea is that tests is written completely in the same way using same APIs. Sorry, so it's coding style and configuration style for any API, and we are just having clients that will translate that standard SAI calls. I will show them yet again. So standard SAI calls to Thrift, to Redis, or like future, maybe like it will be GNMI. And the idea is that test will be using that format, the single format for any case.
For the SAI ReDis channel, right? So you write something to the DB, but how do you know that the SAI function call is is executed correctly or not, right? Did you get the return value and evaluate those return value? How do you know the SAI function call made through?
So Anton, probably I can answer this question.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not sure whether you got a chance to make such a deep dive into the very core of SAI Challenger. So yes, Guhan, as you know, in SAI ReDis we support 3 modes: synchronous, asynchronous, and zero message queue. So in case of asynchronous mode, when we fail, we get notification from SAI ReDis. In synchronous mode, we actually get status from SAI VS, SyncD. So in SAI Challenger, we are using synchronous mode. So when we create, let's say, create SAI message, and then we wait for a response from SyncD. Yeah, so that's how it works.
Okay, but what about those notification calls? How do you get the notification call? For example, I think in the dash there'll be some notifications. Then how do we test those notification calls? Do you have that? In the HA, right? So they design some notification. The site will send those some messages out. How do we do those things?
Do you mean notifications like we have when we have FDB event?
Yeah. For example, right?
Yeah.
But does your framework support that as well?
So that's a very good question. That's probably the only part which was not implemented yet. This is in the roadmap. In fact, currently we support generic requests like create, remove, set, get value, bulk APIs, and also status-related API, statistic-related API. So the notification will be the next one.
Okay.
So the approach here is totally identical to what we have in SONiC. The only difference is in SONiC we use SAI ReDis library, we link it with Workagent. Those library converts requests into the strings, and using specific format, communication is happening between Workagent and SyncD. The same approach here, just instead of SAI ReDis library, we have one Python API, which is operate. And this API makes those messages, provides those communication between SAI Challenger client and SyncD. So in fact, if we consider SyncD as a SAI driver, we are able to test not just SAI library itself, but also this SAI driver, which also contains some logic like serializing of SAI requests. So we will be able to test not just SAI, but all together, which obviously provide a benefit in case we want to extend SyncD with new features.
This might be a good time to segue to that slide, Anton, about why SAI ReDis, because we've got Andre and, talking about the practical advantages of SAI Challenger. It's already in use by people, and not necessarily disclosed.
Sure. I think maybe can you? I still have some question on that part. For example, usually when we call those sites, right? So we get object ID, right? So then, for example, for example, right? So for the ENI object, we create a ENI, we get object ID, and then further, when we try to create mapping those kind of, we need to reference those object ID, right? So, but because this Redis thing is all about writing something in the database. I actually don't know how the testing code is going to handle those objects, because object ID is something that you have to get from the site, right? So basically, you send some commands, create the ENI, and you get the response and get the object ID. You need to pass the object ID, and then form another ReDis string and send to the database, right? So how is this being hidden in your client library? I think that's that seems not very, it's different from the the site ReDis call, the site script call, right? So how that?
Yeah.
I had the same question, and
Yeah.
also when we get the object ID, we have to do so much cross-referencing and all that, and used in the next set of calls. So yeah, I don't know how that would work.
Those are good
Yeah,
questions, and there's a common answer for both the thrift, right? And maybe you could show the format Anton that shows the string, the placeholders, the kind of the variable name.
Chris, I believe the question is about virtual ID which we have in SONiC. So in SONiC we have two maps in ReDis, virtual ID to
no. It's not about the virtual ID, right? Because you are not using SONiC at all, right? So there's no virtual ID here, right? So you just because you are directly calling the the SyncD site, so it's kind of using the real object ID, right? So if I understand.
No, not exactly. So the approach here is actually exactly the same as in SONiC. So we use virtual ID, and mapping is happening between virtual and physical. That's why we don't need changes neither in SyncD, I mean SAI ReDis repo, nor in SVSS common repo. So the flow is exactly the same. So we take virtual ID, the conversion from virtual and physical is happening, and vice versa.
Where do you get the virtual ID from, Andrew?
Yeah.
So the approach again, it's exactly the same as in SONiC. So SAI ReDis is tracking these conversions, and just let me double check, because it was written quite a long time ago. So I just create those virtual IDs the same way as we do in SONiC. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah, Anton, can you show that screen that shows the high-level config and how there's sort of string placeholder?
Yeah, but that's, as I understand the question in the different. Okay, but here, because like when we write this case, it's actually we are using that how to say that links to the names, because we have I probably need to take so that's simpler one. So that's ID. So we have string, and we internally just track from the dash configuration to the some ID returned from the client. But like for both cases,
when we create an object, we get an OID back. It's remembered in the client in a map, and then it can be used in subsequent configuration calls that require that OID, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that true? So it's all automatic. You don't have to keep track of it yourself. The configuration contains variables, let's say, that are populated as you make calls.
Is that handled by this SAI ReDis client, or is that handled by the the overall framework when you manage those object ID?
So that's actually it's part of the SAI-gen and part of the client, because we actually tracking that names and we're replacing them with IDs. So we have internal, when we create some object, we have some ID, we keep it, and then reuse it in the subsequent commands, because for example vnet #1 could be used in the multiple object type creation calls.
So what is this vnet #1? That is
so that's
SAI object ID, or that's a different?
Yeah. When we created actually SAI object type vnet, we have a name of it. its name is mentioned here, and if we have object IDs, and then we store it and we use it. So that's it means that like somewhere in before we had to have creation of the VNet object, because so this dollar means in the beginning means that this is a reference to the previous object ID.
Anton, I have just put to the chat the link to the function that allocates object IDs. So if it's possible to open it, that would help. Really just 5 lines of Python code. And you
So
will
we're
clearly
essentially implementing
like
the
this.
org agent, right? The functionality that org agent does. We're sort of re-implementing and not using it.
It's not implementation of org agent. It's just the client side of SAI ReDis.
Because just memorizing all IDs as you make calls. It's not really orchestrating. That would be probably overstating what it's doing. But it's certainly doing a lot of that messy housekeeping for you automatically.
Yes, right. So here you can see that we retrieve the value of virtual ID counter from the Redis and create object ID the same way as it's done in SONiC, and then increment with counter for the next request. So as I mentioned, the approach is exactly the same as we have in SONiC.
How do you get the syntax? And probably this is another question. How do you get the syntax of how the ASICDB entry should be for each and every type of object, right? Usually that's handled inside of SONiC.
Yes, so that's a great question. I believe at some point we should extend design documents for such kind of things in SONiC to make it more clear for each and every. I had to spend some time to understand those flow based on the sources. And I've added some description into SAI Challenger sources through separate MD file. But that should be definitely extended. But actually the format, so approach how the string is formatted, it's the same for all type of objects. So it's not like every object requires some specific approach. So the approach is always the same. It's always based on the enums and APIs which we have inside header files. So we just need to understand what is the approach, how to format those string. And Anton, if you could scroll, if you could search for those operate function here, underscore operate. You can just, yeah, search operate. The next one, I believe it should be somewhere.
No, it's remote count operates, so that's probably not in that.
No, it's in this file.
Do you dynamically keep track of which object should be written first and which object should come next, and because of the dependency, because the dependency handling is quite complex, right? That we have also recently.
Yeah, so here two answers. First, if you're using that format for writing scenario, so you actually manually keep tracking of the let's say the order, because finally that code is directly translated, for example, to the Swift code, and actually the same way. So still the way you are reading, the way it will be executed. Another thing is that so except of this, if you're using SiGen, so SiGen is designed to generate configuration in some specific order for our for the Dash use cases. So that's still I want just to remind that like you have multiple way of the writing use cases, and one that for scaling, so that's our topic that we are discussing, that using SiGen that generate exact order that you need, because like SAI Challenger doesn't do anything, as I mentioned. It's just abstraction that in the way you put in that SAI objects and that attributes, so that will be in this exactly same order, will execute everything.
So we're not trying to be an orchestrator, but the closest thing to replicating some of that business logic is in the SAI generator itself. It knows to create objects in the order that they're needed. So it's going to create them in a certain order, retain the object IDs, and then those object IDs will be reused in subsequent commands.
So is there auto generation that happens, is there any automated way of creating is there any automated framework in the Challenger that is going to handle these things without, which can be, enhanced to any new set of SAI headers that will come in, like the thrift does, for example, right? I know it uses it, but
well, the
is there
SAI
any
gen
automation?
the SAI gen is the closest thing to that. It embodies the business logic of configuring these devices, over many months of, let's say, trial and error and learnings and validation. It's actually being used in different forms on real hardware at this time. And we actually abstracted it down to the SAI version. And so you can take that code, it's on GitHub, and do anything you like with it. But it's not a framework for developing such code. It's an implementation of a Dash use case config generator.
No, I meant the SAI Challenger. Yeah.
It's just interpreting those records and translating them into API calls. It doesn't try to know the business logic behind it.
Yeah, so actually the one of the cases that we faced during our work, that actually the order is very important, and it's on the tester or the test designer is to set necessary order for some specific use case to verify multiple user scenarios. So maybe if we will just replace some commands, we might have different behavior, and so that's test designer should control the order of execution. So we do not try to hide that part.
So maybe I think you give that this SAI PY. My understand this is your underlying library, right? So can you also give a end-to-end code example? How the test being written? Using this library to actually write the test. Is there example on that?
So examples we put to our PR. So actually examples of, but for Dash, for Dash, test cases how to write tests using the high-level API, and there's also an example to load directly SAI objects descriptions. Also.
Yeah, maybe you can share. I mean, there's certainly, logic to generate those SAI objects, right? So, but I want to get some concrete example. For example, the one that you write, the one that you just run, right? So those FTP, those kind of things, are they using this, this automatic generate client to write to do the test? I mean, maybe those you can share, you can take a look at this, see if there's any comments on that.
Yeah. So Gohan, we already have in the pull request that stage SAI Challenger based tests with different use cases where we're using different ways of generating the config as examples, and they're already running in the pipeline and passing as part of the pull request. So you could actually look, for example, if you were to go to this link, I'm going to paste a link here that shows a pipeline run. This is all actually operational, and as soon as, if and when we merge this request, these tests, some initial tests are already running, and they're using these examples, and we're in the background, we're backfilling more and more test cases. So we're actually in the process of creating, hopefully, a demo suite of such tests. And once we have a bunch of cases, and we'll try to.
No, get this part, but this is using the Swift, right? My more question is on the ReDis side, right? So
when there's a Redis implementation.
Yeah, the one that you pasted it on is using the Swift, right? So I think I'm looking for that.
There's no platform. There's no target that implements that yet. We're waiting for somebody to produce
so
a
that
target.
part, Swift you can do it because my understanding that you can do Swift and you can do with this ReDis, right? So I'm missing something. When you use the virtual this BMV tool, right? So it's just a wrapper, right? So why cannot compile SyncD against this this BMV tool and then be able to run the test with the ReDis, right? Because that's what you guys are proposing, right? So
yeah.
So
do you understand that you want to have manual how to run it the same test against Redis? Do I understand you correctly?
Yeah. Because yeah, exactly, right? So because if you go to the the presentation, I think basically I'm hearing there's a 2 channel, right? So to send the side commands, to the underlying DOT, right? So one is through the Swift, one is the driver. The Swift part, the community have been discussed extensively, so we know how to do it, right? So I think the new part is this side Redis driver, right? So what I'm saying that you don't really need a physical device. Just do the same thing as what we did for the Swift. Then we should be able to run those tests, right? So
I think if I can rephrase, Gohan, what you'd like is at least it's a chicken egg problem, right? We don't have a Dash implementation of SyncD yet, but what we could do to satisfy this and show the framework's working is to have some kind of a SONiC or a VS implementation and demonstrate the Redis, let's say, workflow, even if it's not meaningful for Dash today. Is that what you're asking for? Something that just shows that it's functional, and as we backfill Dash implementation.
This part I don't quite understand, right? So I know that there's no currently we still in development, right? So the DPU vendors, actually DPU vendors still in development of the side, the Dash side, right? So you don't really have an implementation that can work on the DPU, right? However, because of this BMV2 efforts, we do have a virtual switch implementation of that Dash side, right? So which has been demonstrated working using this PTF Swift framework, right? So that part is available.
But
so
it's
then
not
the question,
linked to the Dash side. There's no SyncD virtual SyncD implemented with Dash side yet.
No. SyncD is just taking the side and compile with the side library, right? Because okay, so correct me if I'm understanding wrong, right? So for this Swift of the test that you guys did, right? Is basically we have this P4 model, then we based on the P4 model we generated the SAI API and have a SAI libraries, right? So therefore, then you can hook up with the Intel's Swift framework, so they can call the SAI functions, and then it goes to the SAI library generated and then right to the BMV tool, and you can do the data plan testing, right? So that is my understanding how the this SAI Swift on the BMV tool works, right? So therefore, we do have a SAI implementation on the BMV tool, although it's not totally feature complete. There's no connection tracking. Right? I understand those part, right? So, but there's nothing to prevent the community from compiling the SyncD against this BMV2 based SAI and then get a SyncD running on that on this BMV2, and then you can exercise the SAI ReDis workflow, right?
Yes, and thanks for bringing that up. We actually kind of touched on this many months ago in some kind of a working group meeting where I asked the rhetorical question, do we want a virtual SyncD for Dash? And it's an unknown scoped effort and nobody has volunteered to do that. If there were a container that I could just launch that was Dash SyncD, we would hook it right up. But there's an effort involved and we don't know the scope of that. And no one stepped forward to volunteer. That's like another development project. I mean, if
But
you
like in case somebody already has it, so that's I just opened because part of our commit is contains a description of the setup in the JSON format, and if somebody has, for example, and we'll have it like maybe like internally, so they need to change Swift to the Redis and provide proper information for configuration. The keys description is a part of the SAI Challenger repo. It is there, so that you can find in the documentation actually what keys, but it also contains example of the Redis inside of the SAI Challenger that I just showed as a part of my demo. Yeah, so that's Redis, IP port,
but
log level.
that is not on the Dash object, right? So if I remember the test was mainly on the traditional, the FDB, those kind of test, right? It's not really about the Dash. Sorry. So, why is the internal repo? Because I think this is the BMV2 is open source, right? So SyncD is open source, right? So, just compile the SyncD against the BMV2 side, right? So then we can get that. I mean, sorry, maybe I didn't quite understand that the internal part.
So
I mean, why this is internal?
So Gohan, long story, please, Andrei. Yes.
So in case those SAI implementation for BMV2 does not use some specific SSI extensions, I believe that's possible. So I do not see why we cannot try that. But most likely we will still need some changes in SyncD to make it work. For example, switch type. From what I understood, for Dash scenario, we have a separate switch type, which was not previously available. Is that correct?
For the PDF, you mean?
I mean, in general, so in switch, we have the type of switch object. It can be either ASIC or PHY or something else. So for Dash scenario, from what I understood, switch type was extended with another enum, which is DPU, I guess. So
you're talking about the changes we made for the SciPTF to extend it to Dash?
Not actually for SciPTF, but for SCI headers themselves. So SCI headers still need to be extended. For example, we have inside switch object, and when we create switch object, we provide one of the attribute is the type of this switch object. It can be switch PHY, it can be switch ASIC.
Yeah, but this part has been addressed in the SAI Swift framework, right? So because I guess I think I'm kind of hearing this it looks like theoretically this SAI really should work, but still an important part is missing, which is the SyncD part, right? So
yes.
Well, just to make sure you understand, this has actually been in use for a long time with regular SONiC type implementations. So the framework itself is proven. We just haven't got the Dash, the full vertical slice of Dash simulated, because there's no community version of a SyncD for Dash.
Yeah, but that part of that. No. But that part has been addressed in the SAI Swift, right? So the SyncD part is, I'm just saying that that part is missing. If we do not, get that gap filled, then, this wouldn't quite work, right? So
it wouldn't work. I mean, we wouldn't be able to do virtual testing of this SAI ReDis. Is that your concern? Because it'll work on a real device. It'll work on a real device if such a device is made available. And it's possible, and I don't know, Reshma, you might be able to comment. You know, we could either start from scratch and try to take the current BMV2 and make that compiled into SyncD, but perhaps there will be a more performant version using P4 DPDK available without having to do it in BMV2 as well. That would actually satisfy
that part. I think it's not, you know, quite orthogonal, right? So that is orthogonal because you just need a, you know, because we already have a SAI, right? So whether it's a BMV2 based SAI or DPDK based SAI or the vendor based SAI, right? It doesn't matter. It's just speaking the same language, right? So, but the problem here is that the SyncD doesn't have, you know, sounds like, you know, doesn't support those APIs. Therefore, you know, we're not able to really exercise these parts with for the dash, right? So
not virtually, not yet. Like I said,
yeah, not
right?
yeah.
Yeah, for now. And look, just to give the background of this, the whole idea of this Shrift integration and allowing of these different clients is to utilize what was already used and was already developed and proven to be working. So what we came up for the SAI Challenger is the simple way to hook up to the SAI, which is controlled by the SyncD. That's why we have ReDis and we have this ReDis client. So it's like SONiC without control plane. And we've realized that for the dash, we need additional way to configure because there is no SyncD yet, there is no ReDis yet, and we need a separate way to hook up to the site. That's why the Shrift came in. And by doing that, we've allowed for even more complex things and complex setups. Is you can have several SAI interfaces or several SAI libraries or SAI-enabled devices within the same topology and automate your scenarios only with the SAI configuration. So basically, imagine you have the switch and you have the DPU, you have the DPU libSAI from the vendor, and you connect it to the Shrift, and you have the switch, which is SONiC capable. You connect it through the ReDis, and you can automate this setup right away. So the whole idea of the SAI Challenger is to give the flexibility and the environment for the community to test the SAI on the SAI level. And this is one thing. Additionally, as an option, you can test it on the SONiC level through the ReDis with the same test code. And additionally, you can mix and match your SAI-enabled devices within your topology when you have this use case. Also, there was a collaboration with Keysight on this area to enable OTG to basically serve as the traffic generator interface, which is agnostic and open source as well, and allows to send virtualized to work as the software based with the XESC or T-Rex and scale up to the hundreds of gigabits on the line rate. Again, keeping in mind we are reusing the same test case. So the whole thought process was, we will provide the technology, we will provide the framework which allows the community to build the acceptance or the source of truth test cases and test scenarios, how SAI-enabled device should behave in different scenarios. It can be either single one or topology one. For the dash, at this moment, it's single one. I believe it will change in the nearest future, and provide the ability to make it virtual as we have now through the pipelines, because from the dash as the project itself, it's not important if it's line rate or not line rate. We are not using the hardware in the dash as the open source project. And then provide the ability to the vendors to have the simple way to run the same test cases, which is verified that the pipeline itself and the definitions are work as expected, to run them on their hardware with either Shrift or ReDis. So this was the whole thought process.
I get this part, right? So the whole story, because I think the whole discussion is about on the SAI ReDis part, right? So that part, I think, you know, is still lacking some important pieces, as my understanding, right? So,
well, it's lacking a virtualized verification of it. is what's
Yes.
lacking. That's really the only thing that's lacking is a target.
In the public space at this moment, there is no SyncD which can link with the virtual SAI library for the Dash, and then we can run it with the ReDis so to simulate the whole setup. So once it will be available, and it will be at some point most likely available, we will have this covered as well, and we have this in the roadmap.
Yeah, I think then if you can, I saw some PRs, if you can remove, since that is currently not working, right? So I would like to see a POC on that. So if you can get get that part, not to be included in the PR, then I think other parts should be fine, right? So but that's particular part I do want to see, it will be able to do an end-to-end integration with us, with the SyncD, with those things to be getting, right? So because I think that yeah. So other parts I think the generation,
Yeah.
Those part, yeah.
Yeah.
But not
Yeah,
on
Gohan,
the
just
SyReDis part. Yeah.
Yeah, but Gohan, the SAI ReDis is important for testing SAI in the SONiC environments. So what we
No,
want
but
to
you
have,
cannot test the side. You cannot test the dash portion, right? So
yes,
I
the
understand
dashboard.
that part, but we're all talking under the dash context, right? So existing object. I mean, I don't see how I mean, if you want to do that, maybe move to that to the SONiC repo, not dash repo. But this is about dash, right? So it's not about your SONiC in general.
Oh yeah, look, yeah, for sure. So that's why the SAI Challenger it's under separate OCP repo. So it's the OCP project as well. And the idea here that we will have the OCP project, which can be used by other OCP projects to test SAI. And
no,
we have several.
No, I get that part, but the the linkage is not complete. That's what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. So then I think we need to wait until the linkage is complete, right? So at least I want to see some kind of end-to-end demo with a dash that's running through the SAI ReDis.
Who would provide the linkage, Gohan?
Okay.
I'm asking who would provide the linkage?
I don't know, right? So I assume like someone proposes approach, right? So because on the side Swift, the linkage already there. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. All right, guys. Well, we're 1 minute over. I assume we all have a 10 o'clock meeting to go to.
Okay, well, I think
we
really
pick this up next? Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Yeah, I think there's just one sticking point here, and we'll probably need to, talk offline and figure out appropriate response. If I could summarize it, we need a POC showing virtualized SAI ReDis for Dash, and that would satisfy, I think, Gohan's concern.
Yeah,
like an existence proof. We just thought it was an exercise at this point, but it sounds like it's important. So we'll need to put our heads together and figure out a good response. But
I took a ton of notes, Chris, too. I'll send them over to you.
Thank you. Well, thanks, everyone for continuing this discussion, and thanks. We have a lot of heavy hitters from Peel Vision here today. And I want to thank them for taking their evenings to join us.
Yes.
We think we have something really good here, and we're going to continue to work on test cases meanwhile, even while the PR is in draft form.
Sounds good.
Yeah, appreciate. I mean, I would suggest, orthogonal to that. Orthogonal to that, I think we can, start merging those PR. We don't have to accumulate the PR, right? So, but let's separate. Get other parts, merged, right? So I would prefer that because get things going, right? So.
Okay, so you're okay with like an interim PR merge, and then we further develop the SAI ReDis part over time?
I think we need to remove that SAI ReDis related part. Like the other parts we can get it, right? So
well, I don't know if we need to remove it. It's just we don't activate it because it's just one word in a file that says activate this case, right? The code's already in production, so to speak.
I mean, it's not. I mean, we really want, you know, the things, you know, be merged as it's working, right? So yeah, I mean, if it's not useful, you know, not the enable, why getting? I mean, just separate them, right? And then get other parts merged, so people don't have confusing. Say, okay, which parts it's running, those kind of things. Yeah. So
And Gohan, Chris, we have a quick question in the chat window. Does it matter if it's on virtualized or real hardware? I would think for timing it might, but you guys go ahead.
Yeah, so it should work in both cases, because like you provide the IPs how to connect, and it's connected to IP once you have network connectivity. So you're welcome. So that's it. All you need to provide is the interfaces you expect to be connected to the device and the IP address. That's it. It doesn't matter whether it's virtual or hardware.
Okay. So we ready to close off this meeting then,
Yeah.
Chris? You got what you need. Anton, you got what you need. Thank you, PL Vision and Gohan, for attending. Appreciate your time. And everybody else,
To be
thank you so much
continued.
for coming.
yeah,
To be
thanks.
continued.
Like all important things, take time.
Yeah, right. Okay. I'll talk
Thanks.
to you
Bye,
guys later.
everyone. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.